I have enormous affection for Cherbourg. It's the very first foreign port that I ever visited in my very first sailing boat, which was a 22-foot galleon with an Tomatsu outboard motor with 2 gallons of fuel. So I had to sail the entire way. It actually took me 24 hours to get there from Yarmouth, and the same time coming back. Cherbourg, for those of us on the south coast around the Solent area, is the easiest port to get to. You just go down to the Needles, hang a left, steer 183, and 10 or 11 hours later, depending on your speed over the water, you'll be in Cherbourg. No tides against you, nothing to slow you down, you just go straight across. There is this enormous port, huge port with a vast isolated breakwater in the middle, and an eastern entrance and a western entrance, and frankly you really can't miss it. You're going to find it. Cherbourg Marina is set some distance inside the port. It has places for 1,600 boats in the main marina, and there are a couple of other basins as well where local boats park up. And certainly in terms of facilities, I mean, there are dozens of chandleries, there are dozens of repair places, and the marina itself is very, very well organised with excellent facilities. It is probably the most popular port there is. I mean, it is so easy for us Brits to get there from the Solent. When I sailed out of UK waters, I was based in the Hamble. I used to sail down to Yarmouth, Isle of Wight, park up for the night in Yarmouth, and at dawn set off for the Needles Channel, and I would be in Cherbourg that evening. Great passage. There's a quite interesting tidal problem. There are considerable tides running up and down the English Channel, and in a 6-hour tide on around spring tides, that tide is going to move you 13 miles to the east or to the west in a 6-hour period. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but broadly speaking, if you use something like a tidal atlas, and you do your sums and add them all up together, you will see that the tides are going to sweep you to the left or to the right. Now, in this day and age of GPS and chart plotters, you can, I guess, just put your GPS or chart plotter on follow on your boat, and the chart plotter will counteract the tide all the way across and keep you on track, keep you heading due south. That's not actually the most efficient way to do it, because it just means you're actually sailing further in order to counteract the tide which is sweeping you either to the right or to the left. The most efficient way to get across there is just to head south and allow the tide to take you where it will. It's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal, but it just seems to me that it is nicer to do the passage naturally and let the tides have their effects than it is to buck the system. If you look at these tidal atlases, they have for each hour a tidal stream, these tidal arrows, 20.36. What that means is that at neap tides, when the strength of the tide is weakest, the tidal strength is 2 nautical miles, 2 knots an hour. And at spring tides, when the tide is strongest, when it's moving fastest, it's 3.6 knots. 3.6 of a nautical mile in an hour is how much it will move you. At the end of 6 hours, you will have been pushed, as you can see from this little diagram, 13 nautical miles away from the run line, the direct line, and then for the next 6 hours, it's going to push you 13 miles in the other direction, back to where you were. Of course, you're not always going to be leaving the Needles Channel at exactly high water Dover. You may be 2 or 3 hours after, or whatever. So you will end up in a situation like this diagram, where you are pushed for 3 hours to starboard, and then the tide changes and it starts to come up the channel, and for the next 6 hours you're going to be pushed back across the run line, 6 hours, and then the tide's going to change again, and for the last 3 hours you're going to be pushed back to Cherbourg. Nowadays, I would suggest that you obviously have to come down the Needles Channel with the tide. You don't want to be bucking the tide particularly, and you want to be coming down there as early in the morning as you can, because you don't really, if you're not that experienced, want to be arriving in Cherbourg in the dark. Having got to the Needles, and the Needles is, it's a great sight. At that point, you set off across the channel, and it doesn't actually matter then whether the tide is flooding or ebbing going across the channel. You just go, and as I say, 10 or 11 hours later, you're going to be entering Cherbourg. If you look at an AIS diagram for the English Channel, and I just downloaded one a few minutes ago, you will see that the main shipping lanes are closer to the French coast than they are to the British coast. That's because most ships are going around Ushant and they're heading that way. So for the first part of your passage, you're going to encounter very little in the way of big ships. And although this AIS chart looks desperately crowded, in fact, by the time you get towards the area where the ships are running east and running west, by the time you get there, they're pretty spread out. It's not really an issue. I use AIS a lot. I have a transmitter receiver, and I guess from being in the Mediterranean, doing sort of quite long passages, I have no problem using AIS to call up a ship and check on its intentions if I feel there is an issue. If I'm sailing and it looks like they are going to get pretty close to me, I call them up as a courtesy. Yes, they should give way to a sailing vessel, but I actually just really ask them what their intentions are, and normally they come back and tell me that they're going to increase speed a bit or alter course or whatever. As you approach Cherbourg, when you get, it's somewhere around the 10-15 meter line, 20 meters, 15 meters, you're going to start encountering fishing pots. And they are one of the good reasons for not going into any French port at night if you can avoid it, because frankly you just can't see them in the dark, and very often they don't have flags on them. The last thing you want at night or even in daytime is that bit of rope that's running down to the pot at the bottom, or possibly the nets anchored to the bottom, is having it around your screw, or worse still your rudder, because it gets jammed in under there. It is really hard to get it off. It's lean over the side with a knife to cut the damn thing loose. Of the two entrances, the eastern entrance, the slightly smaller entrance, has got more fishing pots off it than the western entrance. The western entrance, I think, is used more by cruise liners when they get back in business, and merchant ships and cruise ships use that entrance more, and I think people tend to lay fewer pots off that entrance. But if you're coming in daylight and you keep your wits about you, the eastern entrance is fine. There's actually a red buoy, which isn't on my chart, but there's actually a red buoy off there, and if you leave that red buoy to port and go in between the red buoy and the offlying breakwater, you will avoid the pots, because the fishermen don't seem to lay the pots there. When you get through, there's then stacks of time and shelter conditions to put out your fenders and get your mooring lines ready and all the rest of it. And you have to keep navigating. You need to be aware that you then need to get to the next inner breakwater, which is where it starts to get busy. You'll see cruise liners. You'll see French Navy ships. That inner breakwater is which really leads into the main sort of dockyard area. Having got to there, you then need to keep navigating till you get to the marina entrance, and that's a little bit hard to see. It's actually due south. It's actually almost straight ahead of you. There's a canal off to the left which goes up to other yacht basins. And then there's a long breakwater wall, and between the canal and the convention of the breakwater wall is the entrance into the marina. I never call port control going to Cherbourg. I just go in. I don't think there's any requirement to call port control, but I do call the marina Cherbourg Marina. It's actually called something else, but I just call it Cherbourg Marina on VHF Channel 9, and they will tell you where to go. Almost certainly they're going to tell you to go towards Pontoon P. I think if you're around sort of 12, 13, 14 meters, then it's Ponton Q, but Ponton Q is next to Ponton. They're going to send you to Ponton P, and that is past the isolated waiting pontoon ahead. And you just go in there, find an empty place and tie up. As I say, Ponton Q is for slightly bigger boats, but anyway, everybody speaks perfect English in Cherbourg, and they will instruct you. I guess there's half a chance they might send you to another berth in midsummer within the marina, but generally speaking, these two, P and Q, are the visitors' berths, and that's where you head for. Big place. Lots and lots of rows and rows and rows of yachts. Big. You then, having parked up, plugged in your electricity, etc., you go around to the office, which is a few minutes walk. The visitor's berth is not the closest there is to the main marina facilities area. Go down to the office with your insurance and your ship's papers and sign in. There are bars and restaurants around the place, but for my money, I really recommend the Cherbourg Yacht Club. I really do. It's the stairs outside the office that go up, and I've been going in that yacht club for decades and decades and decades and decades. It's really nice. It's really comfortable. You can go in, you can have a coffee, a beer, a glass of wine, nice comfortable armchairs, really friendly staff, and they have a restaurant and they serve very, very nice meals there, very good meals. And that's going into Cherbourg Yacht Club has always been something I've enjoyed. Okay, having given them a plug, I will then go on to plug U-Ship. There are, if you need repairs, if you need something done to your boat, if you need something fixed, there are several ateliers, there are several yard places, Castellastro-Fusi and the various places. And they vary between not being very interested to not being very good or not being very skilled to being okay. U-Ship, on the other hand, which is located at the back of this lot, in a little, you just need to find it, and it is absolutely superb. It is head and shoulders above all the others in the marina. So if you have any issues with the boat, if you need anything fixing, repairing, or if you need stuff, I really recommend you go to U-Ship. They did a brilliant job on Golden Haze, fixing a problem I had with the califier, which several English yards and several French yards had totally failed to sort the problem, and U-Ship did it in a couple of hours. Very reasonably priced, very, very efficient. The only slight issue I have with Cherbourg Marina is that it's quite difficult to buy food. If you walk into the town, which you go up to the main road, there are cafes and restaurants galore for every taste, every style. Absolutely wonderful. I always used to eat in the Café de Paris, but that was because before I lived in France, I just loved eating fresh seafood, and they do a very, very good dish. They're not that cheap, but they are excellent. However, there are no real sort of, the town doesn't really have little sort of supermarkets. It doesn't have a Carrefour City near the centre. So there is a big Carrefour supermarket, and you can walk there. It'll actually, you walk there beside the other basins further on, and if you're walking from the visitors area, you can actually cut across the park area till you get to the road, and then follow the basins until you get to a footbridge, go across the footbridge, and there is a big sort of shopping centre place in which there is a huge Carrefour which has got absolutely everything. The walk is fine. By the time I'd done the shopping, I really didn't feel like carrying it back. So I went to the reception at Carrefour and asked them to call me a taxi. They called me a cab, and that arrived a few minutes later, and it cost me €7 to take me back to the visitors area. And the cab guy knew exactly what the visitors area was for boats in the marina. Cherbourg itself, as a town, other than the periphery of really nice restaurants and seafood places, isn't that wonderful, isn't that spectacular, which is true of a lot of places which got beaten up during the war. I think the most interesting part of it is, frankly, around the marina. There are other places to visit, and it's of course the perfect jumping off place for going to Alderney, Guernsey, Jersey, when we're allowed to visit them again, as I'm recording this during COVID and we're not allowed in. It's a great jumping off place for St. Vast. You just go around the headland. If you're heading for the French canals, and why shouldn't you be? Cherbourg is, and you're not sort of keen on longer passages, Cherbourg is a way of breaking up the journey. You can go from the Solent to Cherbourg, Cherbourg to, say, Ouistreham, Ouistreham into La Havre, take your mast down, or go up to Rouen, which is preferable, and take the mast down there. Coming back from Cherbourg to the Needles does take a bit more planning, and it could be worth leaving in the very, very early dawn. You do need to get to the Needles Passage with a favourable tide. You really don't, at the end of 10 or 11 hours, 12 hours or whatever it is across the channel, want to be bucking that tide all the way up the channel in order to get yourself to Yarmouth or Lymington or wherever. So look at the tide tables again, which will tell you when the tide turns and how strong the tide is running in the Needles Channel to get you back up there. If you've never sailed into a foreign port, then Cherbourg is a great place to do it. It's all weather. It doesn't matter if it's blowing a hoolie. If the weather gets up like mad, you're going to get into Cherbourg, and it's a protected anchorage. It's an all-tide, all-weather port, and very hard to miss. It's huge, very hard to miss. Thoroughly recommend. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you have, please press the subscribe button. No, it's there. It's there. Please press the subscribe button, which means that you'll be informed about other videos. It just means you'll be informed about other videos when I make them and release them, and it helps me get the channel to be more popular and build the channel. So I'd be grateful if you did. What follows now is a little plug for my books and publications, which you can find at michaelbryant.com and sailing.com. I hope you'll excuse that. Thank you for watching this, if you have. Bye.